Welcome to Grr It Happens. This is Mindy Stearns. Well, to know him is to love him. You might know this guy. CEO, entrepreneur, outlier, overcomer, storyteller, visionary, victor, mentor, father, brother, underdog. We're talking about my husband. And this is Glenn Stearns and Grr It Happens.
Are you impressed yet?
Super impressed.
There we go.
She has to read it still, so I'm still a little...
I forget to add doctor.
Thank you,
forgot
doctor.
I know how much you love that. Oh, you're doing headphones? Okay.
Well, you know, it's a warm hug. I get to hear from the other room. They tell me when to quiet you down, when to, you know...
Don't you wish you had that at home?
I could turn it off.
So we have, this podcast is really about stories of grit, of success, entrepreneurism, life hacks. Things that, a lot of people, the American dream is still alive, and we believe that there are certain tools to get there. And, Glenn obviously did a show about it on Discovery called Undercover Billionaire. If you haven't checked it out now, it's on Apple TV now.
And Discovery Plus.
Of
YouTube.
course. Oh, look at him. He knows it all. Go ahead, sell yourself, honey.
I can't remember anymore.
So, and this podcast was kind of born out of that. And we just really love to talk to interesting people with interesting stories. And we have an interesting person in this. Top 40 under 40 most influential mortgage professionals in the country. Hot 100 movers and shakers in the country by Mortgage Professional America. Top 200 loan officers in the country. Top 25 most connected mortgage professionals in the country. And the number 6 mortgage broker in the country by Scotsman Guide. These are some pretty impressive titles. Please welcome Shashank Shekhar. Did I say that right?
You did. Thank you.
Oh, good. You're welcome.
There you go. And I tell you what, Mindy, Shashank and I met, and he and I were talking about his story, and
yes.
I went, wow, there's a lot of similarities, but he goes deeper, and there's a lot of people out there, I think, that have always been, man, you guys were born with a silver spoon, and I have it tough, and this is, we whenever you come across other people who have had, who haven't had it handed to them, let's put it that way, it's inspiring. And that's what this is really about, is to kind of help other people realize that it doesn't matter where you are, it's all about getting up, picking yourself up and keep moving forward.
True.
And so do you mind, Shashank, kind of take us back a little bit, how'd you literally get here,
Yeah, your backstory. Where'd you start? Where
Sure.
Where were you born?
I was born in a small village in India, and for some people listening to this, they may not identify to the kind of place where I was born, but we had no electricity, we had no running water, no roads, and the closest school where I used to go to was a 2-mile walk. Because, of course, there was no roads. You were not driving or anything. And I was just actually having a team's lunch, and I was telling them that my school had no benches or tables or chairs. So we used to sit on the floor. And so that's where I come from. That's where I was born. That's where I was initially raised. And I was able to, my parents were still very deeply focused on education. So I was able to go to the big town next to my village, got my education there, went to study at one of the best business schools in India, majored in marketing, top of my class there, and then went to work for General Electric, which I'm sure GE is one of the biggest companies on the planet. Worked for them, and then I moved to work for a startup so I go from this huge organization that's hundreds and thousands of employees to this organization which has 1 employee. So I was their second employee.
Wow.
And the reason for me moving there is that even during my business school, I always used to tell my friends is that I'm in the business school because I want to start my business one day. That was my deep drive behind
Always
it.
had a vision.
So I was like, yes, there is security and everything of GE working for this huge global conglomerate, but I want to work for this one guy who has built a business before, and I want to learn from him how to build business from ground up. So business is reasonably well. We got some venture funding for that, and then they were looking for someone to head the U.S. office here. and they transferred me from U.S. to India, from India to U.S. And I came to the Bay Area, which is Northern California here. And so, yeah, that's
That was
basically
how you got to this United
that's
States.
basically
Wow.
from being born in a place which practically had nothing to come to the land of opportunities, as they say.
That's an
That's
incredible
amazing.
story. How was it the entry to the U.S.? What was like one of the first impressions you remember of coming?
It's I mean, I come from India, which at least at that time was still developing. I mean, it's still a developing country. It has gone through massive economic transformation over the last 15 years, become this global economic giant that India is right now. But we were still going through that period. I mean, startups or people starting companies was almost unheard of. I mean, people like us who went to business school would almost always end up working for someone and not starting their own companies. That has changed a lot since. But when I came here, I mean, one of the first impressions that I had of talking to other people are like, oh, I'm thinking of doing this, especially in Silicon Valley. I'm thinking of doing that. I'm like, who are these people? I mean, how come they don't want job security and all they want is to start something or the other? But I mean, just I think the culture of people in Silicon Valley. I mean, I think I'm very fortunate to land at that place where entrepreneurism is so much high in terms of both in demand and supply. So you kind of get into that culture. So I think I'm fortunate to land there.
Yeah, it's funny, when I started in the mortgage business, I was fresh out of college, and I happened to just land at a brokerage company that the owner of the company's son, who was around my age, and the owner of the lender that bought all the paper, her son also worked there. And these two young guys, I was about 23, they were 22, 21, and they both drove BMWs at their own homes. They were doing 25 loans a month. And so you never know. When you start out in a place that's so fast,
Yes.
then you think you're always behind, and it's a good place to be versus you play to your level, right?
Yeah.
If you always want to play with someone better than you, so you keep accelerating. And but if you come into a place that's really slow, you just might continue on that path, and you went obviously to a place that was, supercharged.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
I'll take it one thing. Mindy and I had, went around the world. We had a very, amazing opportunity to spend a couple of years just seeing the world. And I'm largest shareholder of a bank, Infinity Bank, and they're the CEO of the bank. I had told him he's from India, and I said, hey, we might go to India. He says, why do you want to go there, Glenn? It's dirty and it's polluted and crowded, and I said, well, I think we want to go see what it's all about. And I remember we landed at
1 a.m.
1 a.m. It was packed. I mean, why are all these people awake? And then, obviously it just kept going, right?
Yes,
and
of course.
when we woke up, we decided to go and
Hit the street.
sit.
We were in
and-
Delhi.
Yeah, remember that we had
Delhi.
someone to walk us
But a guide,
around,
yeah.
a guide, and
we
that
almost
road, trying to get across the road. Oh, one more thing. When we were in the airport, I was going to put my stuff through the X-ray machine, and I went to get, and this lady just cut in front of me and put her back. I went, that's rude. Like, why would she do that?
We learned.
But what I found when you get to India is if there's a space and they take it.
Yes,
Like in the
of
road,
course.
you just take it. And she wasn't rude. It was just
what
the
do you do?
culture, right?
Yes.
And we got there and we tried to cross the road. And I'm like, I got my kids and I'm stressed out. And I'm going, and the guy goes, no, just go. I go, no, I'm not going to get hurt. No, just walk. And he walks and the seas parted. And I went, by the end of that trip, we were
loved
walking
it.
across the roads.
We
but
loved it.
when we got there, it was dirty, polluted, crowded, smoky, like you wouldn't believe. But after a couple days, the beauty unfolded, the wonderful colors, the very kind people. And I we both absolutely loved it. And I came back to our CEO from the bank. I said, "You're wrong. Like, you're looking through the wrong lens of, because I thought it was amazing country."
And he wasn't technically wrong, of course, because even now when we go back to India, that's the first reaction. Even though I grew up there, lived there for almost first 30 years of my life. That's the first reaction that I get when I land at the airport. So many people, and of course, you get used to it after a while. But for someone it's their first experience, and I've heard that from a lot of my friends who were born and raised and grew up here, is that's always their first reaction. There are so many people, right? And then of course they realize they go through that experience of going through the beauty and the culture. I remember I was very young when Bill Clinton visited India, and he went to see the Taj Mahal. And after that, his comment was, there are only two kinds of people in the world: one that has seen Taj Mahal and the one that hasn't. So that's how beautiful.
We've seen it. We're there.
So that,
we have a
what was the most magical place was
Varanasi.
Varanasi. Yeah.
And,
Did I say that right? Varanasi?
Yes.
when we got there, the rest of the group, it was really just our family, but they were all tired, and everyone wanted to go to sleep early. And I had also asked a guide to come and show us around at night, and they all wanted to go to sleep. I said, I'm going to go. So I went with the guide, and we got in the little toot-toot, I think it's called, right? And it didn't go anywhere. It just stuck. And we finally made our way up, and then we walked through these little, lanes, and there were cows that stuck their heads out of the windows, and it was amazing. We're right on the river,
Ganges.
the Ganges, where they'll burn their dead and put the ashes out, and it was going all night. And but the circle of life, I'm seeing these bodies being burned everywhere, and then there's a wedding right there, and there's baby, and it's like it just was fascinating.
It's a bewitching
it was
country.
amazing.
It really is.
It is.
We
For sure.
enjoyed it. The kids loved it. We all had a really neat experience there.
So you find yourself in
San Francisco.
Northern California,
Mm-hmm.
in probably the most competitive place you could ever go
On the planet.
on the
Yeah,
planet.
pretty much.
Right. And so what got you into mortgage lending?
Yeah, so the company was in the mortgage space. They used to sell leads to mortgage companies back then, and that's what their business model was. And I actually went and sat on the shop of a mortgage broker, so one of our clients there, to see how are they actually using these leads. So I actually used to pick up the phone when somebody used to call. So I sat there for 5 weeks in downtown San Francisco just to go through the mortgage experience, which later on turned out to be that turned out to be a blessing in disguise, so to say, is because those 5 weeks is when I learned my mortgage business. Because I was picking up the phone, I was talking to people, I was taking loan applications. So I got my DRE license when I came here. Because I had a master's, I did not require work experience and all that, so I could get my license. And I sat on the shop for 5 weeks. And actually ended up closing 5 loans in like 3 weeks or something.
Wow.
The broker was impressed, like coming from nowhere and everything else. So I guess I had a little bit of it in my, I had a knack. I was a natural at it. But that was my process of being brought into the mortgage industry, so to say. But that wasn't my job. I was head of business for the company. And it was VC funded at that time. But then only about 6 months in the country, I started realizing that the timing is so wrong, because I could, the news of New Century closing down, or at least being in trouble, that all started happening, say in late 2007. I came in early 2007, late 2006, early 2007. And I very quickly realized that this was really bad time from a timing perspective.
February 2007 was New Century.
Yeah, so around late 2006 is when I think October 2006 is when I came to the country. So 3-4 months into it, I'm like,
let's go into the mortgage space.
Exactly. And then I think 3, 4, 5 months later, the president calls me and said, okay, all the VC funding is out. They're not going to keep funding this thing. A couple of months later, he said, we are filing for bankruptcy. And so, do you want to stay here, go back to India? What do you want to do? And so, thankfully, I had my permanent resident card by then and gotten my green card.
Wow.
So I came on a visa where that's the highest work visa classification that you get, because I was a multinational executive in a firm. So I had my green card, but I had this 6-month-old baby and my wife here in a country where, of course, you didn't really make any money in 6 months. The company was filing for bankruptcy. But I always wanted to do something on my own. I was like, so I'm sitting in Silicon Valley. I'm in US, the land of opportunities, within which I'm in Silicon Valley, within which I've, as the luck would have it, I have my license, I have my green card, and I've had some experience doing mortgages.
Right.
And it seems as if I know how to do it. So why not give it a shot? So 2008 April, when they officially shut the company down, I had my DRE broker license. I had everything from paper perspective. I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. I'll see how it goes. 12 months, nothing happens, we'll probably go back to India. We are very well qualified. We'll get a job back, no problem. But as if everything is destined to be this way, I don't want to just give it away, because I always wanted to do something on my own. I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and probably this is the time to try it.
Yeah. You know what's interesting?
Yeah. Really did.
When you think about people that come into any industry, you have the people that succeed and people that don't.
Mm-hmm.
And you can have any excuse you want.
Yes.
Right? You have people that come in where the industry is on fire. Last year,
Yeah.
on fire in the mortgage industry, right? I mean, you could not
You could do
help
nothing wrong.
make
Yep.
millions of loans, and you walk in at a time where I would say it was the best time ever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And it was because there was nowhere to go but up.
Mm-hmm.
Nowhere to go. And so if you can cut your teeth in a time like that, and a lot of people wouldn't think that, you know what I mean? It's just a perspective that you go, oh, this is horrible. No, that's the right time, because then all you're doing is sharpening your skills.
Yeah.
And then when there is a little tailwind, boy, are you going to be able to to thrive, And so I wonder, you look back, we go back to similar stories,
Mm-hmm.
because at least even on from the television show, I mean, I started with $100 and a beat up pickup truck. You started with $1,900, right? And had no friends.
Yeah.
You're out here on your own doing the same thing. So, did you ever, because there's a lot of people that start and they get miserable and they want to quit, and there's always on your, right there on your shoulder saying, give up, go back home. You can be happy there. Did you have that ever, or was India a place you just wanted to get out of so bad, or, did you have your own self-doubt?
Surprisingly enough, India was not a place that I wanted to get out of. For us, both of us, because my wife went to business school as well. So for both of us, it was more about, let's go to the U.S. I mean, it's the biggest economy in the world. I mean, it is at the end of the day America, and get a couple of years of work experience, which will be huge for our resume when we come back to India. So we have international experience, and that too working in U.S. and Silicon Valley. So for us, it was more about resume building, nothing else. We'll stay there for 3-4 years and then come back, because we didn't have any friends here. We didn't have any relatives. My closest relative was my wife's uncle who lived in Canada. So not just in Silicon Valley, not in the entire country. I mean, we didn't have anyone. So it's a question of, in India, when you're raising a young kid, you have the support of, as they say, the entire village.
Yeah.
Like you have grandfathers, grandmothers, you have uncles, you have cousins, you have aunts. Like everyone comes out to help, right? You can leave your kid anywhere; it doesn't really matter. So, I mean, for the first-time parents being here, it wasn't so much a question of, do we really want to get out of India? It was more about, hey, let's see what U.S. corporate experience looks like. But talking of self-doubt, I'll be lying, Glenn, if I'll tell you is that in the first 12 months when I closed 7 loans, that's like half a loan a month, and I made $21,000, out of which pretty much everything had to be paid back into some kind of investment here and there. Coming from a 6-figure salary, I mean, being an MBA and all of that I did not have a self-doubt. So self-doubt does creep in when month in after month out, and you're doing this thing and it's not really working. I was trying everything I could, but one of the things that I realized very early is that you can know a lot about the business itself, But if you don't know how to get clients, that's a big problem. One of the things that I tell a lot of young entrepreneurs who come to me, especially in Silicon Valley, where a lot of them have technical backgrounds, is that I tell them, look, I'm sure you have the skills of doing this thing. I have no doubt you can code this thing and build this thing and have the products and everything. But have you thought about how would you get your first 10 or 12 or 100 clients? Because that's what feeds the business, right? I mean, you could be best at coding or programming or building a car or whatever you're doing, be really good at. And that was my biggest learning in the first 12 months, is because I thought that having an MBA and working for a VC funded company and knowing my guidelines, I really knew my guidelines cover to cover, because those 5 weeks, that's one thing that I focused on. I had all the technical skills, so to say, but I didn't know how to get clients. And so self-doubt did creep in. Having at the same time, as you rightly said, 65% of the people were leaving industry or had left industry between, say, mid-2007 to mid-2009. Right. And I saw that as a huge opportunity. I said, okay, I'm not really doing well at it, but if I can find a way to do well at it, then the future can only get brighter from here. So if this is what I wanted to do for the last 5, 6, 7 years of my life, working through different corporate companies, and this opportunity has been given, even though I feel like giving up every now and then, this is not something I'm going to give up easily. And so I stayed at it.
That's wild. I mean, and I always say, find your buyer first, right? And if you think, there got so many of us that go out and we plan and plan and plan, and we roll out and we have nobody to buy our product, and then we feel we were busy, but you weren't smart in your in your whole business plan. And so having and knowing where you can go, and that was also something that obviously came out of the show, was I will be successful if I know somebody needs something and I can go get it for them, And in the case of mortgages, it's always about pivoting. It's always about changing. It's always about figuring out what's next. And in those days, we came up, this is 2007 and 8, right? So for those of you out there that we don't normally, I don't go into my mortgage business on the show that much, right? It's more about people's grit and how they figure it out. But back then, just a little history lesson, folks. 2007, there was, you could look up, it might still be out there, mortgageimplode.com.
Yes, it was.
The implodometer. Yeah. There were hundreds of mortgage companies going under. Yeah. But I remember coming out of it and nobody remembered how to underwrite a loan with tax returns. We had been so easy to state it.
I'll tell you a story around that, Glenn. So I remember one time driving from San Jose, where I lived, to Orange County here, almost 6 hours drive one way, because CAMB was doing a class. FHA, they brought an FHA underwriter to teach how to do FHA loans. I drove 6 hours, sat here, and then drove 6 hours back because I didn't have enough money to spend the night in the hotel back then. So 6 hours, took a 4 hours class, drove back 6 hours, but then I knew everything about how to do FHA, which nobody in the entire Bay Area knew. So I would teach to real estate agents, and I'll have loan officers from Bank of America and Wells Fargo and everybody sitting in the audience because they didn't know how to do FHA loans. Right. So I had to teach first real estate agents, hey, you can accept approvals with FHA, you can accept pre-approvals with FHA because these are the benefits of this. And the benefit of that, what happens is that even the real estate agents who were not referring me business otherwise, if they got a first-time home buyer or got an FHA client, they said, go talk to Shashank because he knows how to do these loans because others don't. So I think it's huge is that you figure out what your niche is, even in adversity. And then don't just find a niche, build your skills to back up that niche. Just to say that I'm a first-time home buyer expert means nothing if you can't really back up with the substance and the knowledge. And I think that was my first really, I mean, they say the big break in movie, TV industry kind of a thing. For me, that was the big break that really started giving me a few consistent loans a month.
That's something because we came out of that and there were so many people in shock, and that's why the world, and it level sets like it always does. So you get people going, I can't do this business anymore, and they all leave, or you adapt. And it's just, I think where you have grown and excelled and where you see other people that have or have not is by looking ahead. Never look down at like what you're doing or look backwards and be proud, because it's, you never know what's going to hit you there, where you're going. You always got to be looking forward. I think when you where are you now in terms of your business, because you were this guy that was doing it, and now you've grown to be a pretty substantial company.
Real
How did that
presence,
happen?
Yeah, so pivots, right? At different stages of your career, you need to pivot to something else. I mean, it's they're different. My first stage was probably the first 12 months, which was brutal, painful, and a lot of learning.
Did you have, just a side note, did you have a mentor in that time, someone you could trust in, a confidant or anybody?
Not really. I mean,
you were on your own,
I was trying few things, failing at most, and trying to get something or the other working.
Failure didn't deter you.
Yes. But so I went through that stage of doing nothing to first becoming one of the top producers in the country, but became top 20 in the country, and when it came to loan officer ranking, consistently doing 200-300 million of production. And then I think it was around 2018-19. So I ran a very small shop for a few years, just sharpened my blades around learning more. And then it was around 2019 that I was realizing that I'm doing good. I was speaking at events across the country and everything. But when you're speaking, you're basically talking to people for 30, 45 minutes. I mean, a couple of people are paying attention. They don't really get to do much after that. You're not able to drive that much change in that time. And I thought I'd learned enough where I can actually grow next generation of leaders. And the only way I could see doing that is if they were part of the organization, because then I can mentor them, coach them on a regular basis. And that really drove the second pivot of my career, so to say, where it was like from being one of the top producers in the country to starting building the legacy, starting building an organization, starting building a team of people that I can mentor and coach. So we went from 5 people, I think, in 2019 to about 105 people now, and we'll probably end the year at 300 people. That's a kind of growth.
Wow.
We made the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America, not just within the industry, but across companies. There are like 6 million private companies in America, only 500 make that list. We made that last year. We'll make it again this year. We were the only mortgage company in the country to make the Deloitte Fast Tech 500 list, because we created the first digital human in the mortgage industry.
Rachel?
And we beat Rachel, yes. And we beat companies like Zoom, Pinterest, Esquire on the list. And we were 110. They were lower than us. So
I want to know about Rachel. Tell me.
Sure. So Rachel is...
Cutting edge technology. The first
It is.
Human,
Digital human.
Digital human.
Yes. So Rachel builds on the same technology that Google Assistant or Alexa or Siri or IBM Watson has, which is conversational AI or conversational artificial intelligence, which is you can talk to them, right? Like we talk to Siri, we talk to Alexa.
You built this. Your company.
Yes, we built it.
So there's some technology like gurus in your midst that you brought on board. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, the surprising thing is that I don't even have a technology background. They see an Indian guy, they see he must be an engineer. I'm not. Surprisingly enough, I'm not. And the funniest thing is that I actually went to college and studied English literature. You will probably find the only Indian guy who will probably find in the U.S. who studied English literature.
Interesting.
It is very interesting. I grew up in this village where I didn't even learn English until I went to 6th grade. But I was 8 years old and I was in 7th grade. So apparently I was smart.
Wow.
So my mom is like, you're wasting your smartness because you're studying with all these other kids who are probably not smart. That's why you're smart or whatever. And she was my first teacher. She was a school teacher.
Oh, really?
So she sent me to my aunt to a much bigger town, one of the biggest towns in India, Calcutta. And there they put me in an English medium school where everything was in English. And the first day I walk into the school, the only English sentence that I knew is, "What is your name?" and nothing else. And I was like, oh my God, if somebody asked me any other question in English, I would not know how to answer it because that's the only sentence I know. So,
oh my God.
So there are lots of funny stories around everything that I misunderstood in the first year and everything else. But anyway, so I end up, but I got really good. And again, that's probably very young, but I used to read English newspaper every single day. I'll watch English news I'll do everything in English just because I wanted to get better. Because I was like, okay, I would not let a language get into my way of succeeding. And by the end of that school year, I was fourth in the class in a language that I only knew one sentence of before the school year started. But then I get to this other school because now I'm good in English, so my aunt put me in a better school after that. And they taught this was a course curriculum that followed curriculum from England. And so they taught original William Shakespeare, not stories, not summarized. Oh. So original William Shakespeare. So we read Merchant of Venice and Julius Caesar, which became my favorite book.
Merchant of Venice was the first.
Yes, but
yeah,
and
Merchant of Venice.
And wow. I fell in love with William Shakespeare so much that I was like, okay, I'm going to just study English literature. That's what I was to do. And in a country like India, if you're not a doctor or engineer, you end up pretty much on the streets. There is no other job. Like every single person that you met, especially the people who grew up during my times, their parents or they themselves, the only thing they wanted to become was doctor or engineer. And that's why you have so many doctors and engineers in India, is because those were the only two things we went after we were done with our high school. But I ended up doing English literature, much to the chagrin of my parents, because they were like, he'll end up doing nothing.
Be a teacher.
And as luck, and I ended up with like a $30 a month kind of my first job, is because of course you don't get anything out of that. I was in a sales job trying to sell people to join computer courses. And my boss comes to me one day and said, Shashank, you're really good at this thing. Have you thought about getting a professional degree around it? And I said, what professional degree? What? And he said, there's this MBA thing. Have you thought about doing that? I said, okay, I have no idea, but if you're telling me, I'll look into it. And so that's how I ended up at one of the best business schools. So that my entire childhood is a different story altogether. But yeah, so I'm not an engineer because I did not do that. But I was very intrigued when I saw the concept of digital human, is because conversational AI has become part of our lives. Talking to Siri and Alexa has become second nature to us. We treat them like another human. Mm-hmm. It's just that they're in an audio format. They're not in a human format. Mm-hmm. So when I saw the technology around digital human, with some people in Europe and some hospitals were doing, I thought this would be very interesting for us to work on from the mortgage industry perspective. And that's where we created Rachel, which is all Rachel really is that it's able to answer questions around mortgages. So you can, I did a live demo for the team when we did a team event in Las Vegas a few months back. It's always a little, I'm sure even Steve Jobs might have gone through it, is that when you do a live demo of a technical product, you don't know if it'll work or not, because it's going live. It's like when Elon Musk did that with the truck. Right. It did not. He threw it once. He made fun of it. Tried it again. It still did not work. Thankfully, it worked. But really, that's what Rachel is supposed to be, the Siri and Alexa for the mortgage industry. If you have a question on mortgage, ask Rachel and she will answer it.
Where's Rachel found?
It's on the website. So InstaMortgage.com. Go there. And then you will find it's on the homepage. And we are, of course, just like any other AI platform, we are trying to make Rachel better so that she's able to answer even more questions, answer client status question, help with pre-approval, mortgage payment calculation. So we're trying to build more capabilities into it, and maybe eventually make a metaverse. Rachel be a part of the metaverse where she can be able to walk the customers around and answer questions. So
you know what's interesting is, you look at our business, and you can walk in today and go buy a $150,000 car and leave 2 hours later.
Yeah.
But to go in and walk in and buy a home that can't drive to Mexico or drive to Canada or get stolen, it takes you a month, and it takes you so much just heartache and stress.
Yeah.
It's continually a process that we need to make easier for the consumer, and that's another reason we jumped in as well, is to take that and work. So people like yourself, like Kind Lending, we're out there trying to make it easier, because it's just not right that you can go off and buy these huge assets for such ease, yet you can't buy a home that easily. It's crazy.
And a depreciating asset, right?
Exactly.
I mean, unless you bought in the last 2 years, then car suddenly became an appreciating asset.
For another couple months until the supply chain
Yes, of
gets fixed. But I go back to one thing you were saying earlier about when you were talking about building your business, because again, I think of the folks at home, right? And the people that I've been so fortunate to meet through social media that want to know, how do you do it? What do you do? And how can you, and a lot of people get to a place where they're afraid of what's going to happen when they let loose, when they aren't in control as much. And that's where you stop growing, I think, if this makes sense. Because I've known so many people that say, man, I don't trust my own people. They're out there making copiers, machine go, and they're causing me all this stress because they're stealing my coffee, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So they keep small.
Yeah.
And what you've got to do is always figure a way to replace yourself. You have to continue to allow people and give them that ability to grow and trust. And hopefully you gather your team, which is trustworthy.
Yeah.
If they're not, you replace those people
Sure.
that aren't, But how hard was it for you to replace yourself?
It was very hard, and I'm glad that you brought that point, is because I stayed small for a very long time. Is that what I did in 2019 I could have done in 2016, for example. It's not that I learned so much more over that next 2 years that suddenly something flipped in my head. But the fear of becoming bigger was always there. It's like, okay, I built this amazing culture that I provide customer service and education to my clients, my processors. This is a 5-member team that totally dialed into how I want a mortgage process to run. So for me, it was a big change, letting go of that.
Right.
And you hit the nail on the head, is that you basically read my mind, that what I was going through over from say 2016 to 2019 is because a lot of people will come to me after conferences, hey, are you hiring? I mean, I would love to join your team. I said, no, I'm not. I just want to stay small. This is the 5-member team that I want to work with. But it takes a lot of gumption, really, to say that, okay, I'm letting it go and see where it goes with that. And you make mistakes. I made a ton of mistakes with hiring, with having the wrong people and everything. But I think one thing that I did well was I follow a philosophy called care deeply but challenge directly when it comes to leadership. Is that you lead with empathy. Yes, that's the most important thing, right? We hear a lot of people now talking about empathy. Is that empathy is very important. And I agree that empathy is very important. Glenn, you're sick. I mean, stay at home. I mean, don't come here. Don't worry about it. I'll have someone else take care of your work. That's empathy. But if you only care deeply but do not challenge directly, you are doing disservice to both that person and to yourself and the organization.
Right.
And if you only challenge directly but don't care deeply, then you're just being an obnoxious boss that nobody wants to work with, right? I think the best leaders really understand both of that, is that they care deeply but they challenge directly. I think I did that very well in terms of able to blend both of that, where I gave a lot of independence to the people who came in, saying that you're free to do this, and if you make a mistake, don't worry about it. It's on me. When you empower people to make mistakes, I mean, they think the world of you, and they're so much loyal to you because they see that you trusted them with a role which even they did not think that they would be able to. I mean, I can tell you the transformational story of so many team members when they came into where they are in life, and that's not I'm not even talking professional growth. I'm talking personal growth from where they are to where. So I think and that does not mean that every person I tried this with, every time it was successful, that everybody gave that trust back to me, and people have backstabbed me, people have done things that they should not have. But that does not mean that you change as a person. I mean, I was just telling that to someone, is that there are certain kind of values that I was raised with. There are a certain kind of person I am. Just because somebody backstabs me does not suddenly make me a person who would be different, and I would not trust that. So I think it's very important that two things. One is that at some point in your life, you have to embrace that you can be much bigger than who you are. And you also have to embrace the fact that will come with new learning and hardships, and you should be ready mentally. A mindset, I think that's a huge thing.
So your trajectory and everything you just said, about how you got there, I absolutely agree with. I was young. My family, we were very blue collar, and I didn't have many mentors either growing up. Yet, I'd failed 4th grade. I had a child in the 8th grade.
I read about that.
And at that time, I had a gentleman that came up to me and he said, "You know what, Glenn? I believe in you. You're going to go somewhere in life." And I was in the middle of the biggest funk of my life.
Of course.
And I thought, wonder why he said that. Like, what did he see? And then I got to college, and I was an insane, crazy partier. And another gentleman came up and in front of all of my fraternity brothers that I founded a fraternity again, party. But he said, there's something about Glenn, and I admire him, and he made me stand out. And these little seeds that were planted, right, are so important, both that we plant them, but that we also hear and recognize, because you just said it, where you have to empower other people, and you have to let them, and you have to tell them that you believe in them and trust them, and then they will shine. They will do things that you never believe they can do. And it's so important to allow people. I have been so proud of watching people that have grown up in the last 30-something years in my
most satisfying thing that you can have is
grown through the organization. But now, and then it's a point where you also give back, right? And so we are members of many organizations. One is Horatio Alger, and it's just look those young men and women in the eyes and say, you are special, and you're going to go so far. And then you want to do that. You want to prove I'm going to get there. I'm not going to do the bad stuff my family did or whatever, because I want to prove to that person. It's amazing what a tiny little seed can do,
So you have a lot of these anecdotes, and you have the blog that a lot of people follow, which is like one of the top mortgage blogs.
Yes.
And then you also have a book you wrote.
Two books. Yes. My first home was a #1 seller, I believe.
That's correct, on Amazon. So I wrote Real Estate Unleashed with Carol Rodoni. She was the past president for Cornish, and I forget the commercial real estate company's name, and also a residential real estate company in my Bay Area called Alan Pinnell Realtors. And that was more about real estate professionals around 2011, 2012, is how the industry has changed and what they can do to benefit from it. And then my first home is basically guiding first-time home buyers how to buy their first home, which was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. But blogging is something that I've kept. Again, another thing about discipline is that if you want to create a platform and be successful at it, you have to spend a lot of time. I remember 2009 is when I started blogging, and I was really bad at it. I've kept some of those blogs which are cringeworthy. I would never want my children to read it because I tell them I'm a good writer now. And
you've refined it over the years.
Yeah, but for first 6 months, I wrote 2 blog posts every single week for first 6 months, and so that's that's a lot of just because if you're bad at it, it takes you a lot of time to write bad even if it's bad writing, it takes you a lot of time to think about it. It does not come naturally to you, right? So it took me a lot of time, but I had time because I wasn't doing much loans back then. It was only after 6 months of consistent writing 2 blogs every single week that I got my first phone call, and somebody said, I read your blog on the web. And I almost fell off the chair. It was like, where did you read it again? He said, I saw you on the web. You wrote something that I want to talk to you about. And I was actually teaching blogging to real estate agents at real estate boards, because I was, again, one of the first ones. So the real estate boards will call me to do those teachings. And I'll teach them, and 2 weeks later, they will come, this thing doesn't work. I've tried it for 2 weeks, and nobody called me, and nobody saw me or anything, and it doesn't work. And then that thing for me became so big is because that first guy found it, but then 3 weeks later, somebody from Yahoo News called me because they say, we were Googling about something, we are doing a news on mortgages, and we'd want your quote because we found your blog on the web. And then one thing led to the other, and of course now I get consistently quoted in Washington Post. I write for Forbes and Inc. and Housing Wire and everything. It's a question of
look.
Yeah, it's like
10,000 hours
is that
in.
look at you now sentence, Mindy. You can can say to thousands and millions of people. It's just that they just don't go over that initial bump. Is that it's not, I mean, English was my third language. I mean, even though I went to college and read English literature, I just told you until I was like 9 and 10, the only sentence I could speak was, "What's your name?" Right?
And you went from that to now writing like one of the most popular blogs. It
Yes.
just, I mean, I think that's a good testament to how much determination and consistency and putting the work in and doing it and don't give up is so crucial.
And so many people think they can do that, but I can't. Whatever
Yeah,
it is,
exactly.
right? And you just have to say, why not me, right? And then start and put yourself in that vulnerable position and go for it. And you're right, look back and maybe you'll cringe over the beginning of what you did, but you know what? You get better and better as you go.
You do.
So, Shashank, this has been so interesting.
Yeah.
We really appreciate taking time out of your schedule to sit down with us. So people can follow your blog. Tell them where we can find you.
Mortgageblog.com, so easy name, I guess.
Mortgageblog.com.
Yes.
That is easy. And your books are on Amazon if
Yes, they
interested.
are.
And you just love to continue to watch where you go with us. And we thank you for stopping by Grit Happens to sit down with us and talk to us about what's going on.
Thank you so much.
You can follow Grit Happens on Instagram and Facebook. And we appreciate you stopping by to listen to us. And this has been another episode of
Grit Happens.
Thank you.